for your copy of this ebook now.
Chapter 3: The Radical Teacher: Reimagining the Educator's Role. Introduction. The African theological classroom today demands more than information transfer. It calls for transformation. To rise to this call, theological educators must radically reimagine their roles, not as mere lecturers dispensing knowledge, but as facilitators of holistic formation, servant leaders who influence lives, and living models of Christ-centered pedagogy. In this chapter, we examine the emerging identity of the theological educator through three vital paradigms, from lecturer to facilitator, authority and servanthood in leadership, and modeling Christ-like pedagogy. These paradigms are not simply pedagogical shifts, they are spiritual postures and professional commitments critical for effective theological education in Africa. Subheading 1: From lecturer to facilitator, shifting the educational lens. Historically, the theological educator in Africa was often seen as a sage on the stage, a respected authority figure tasked with transmitting doctrinal orthodoxy. While this role has its roots in church tradition and African respect for elders and teachers, modern learning theories and contextual challenges urge a transition from instructor to facilitator. In the African context, many seminaries and Bible colleges still rely heavily on didactic methods, valuing rote memorization over critical engagement. However, researchers like Adeniyi and Bediako 2022 emphasize that learning in the African theological space must shift towards dialogical processes where students critically interact with the world, their culture, and their community. Facilitation encourages this interaction by creating environments where students are active participants in their formation. Moreover, Munyua and Motuni 2021 argue that a facilitative teacher is one who corrects learning environments rather than commands them, one who listens as much as speaks. This shift does not undermine authority, rather it reframes it. The facilitator becomes a guide who stimulates discovery, nurtures curiosity, and empowers learners to think theologically, biblically, and contextually. In alignment with Paulio 1970 Vision of Liberty Pedagogy, adapted in Modern African Theological Education by Chitando 2023, education must become a co-creative journey between teacher and learner. The radical teacher sees students not as blank slates, but as carriers of stories, spiritual insights, and cultural wisdom that enrich the educational process. Subheading 2: Authority, Servanthood, and Influence, Leading like Christ. In theological education, the question of authority is deeply theological. It is not merely about classroom management or academic credentials. It is about the spiritual authority to influence lives. Christ, the master teacher, exemplified servant leadership, a model that radically contrasts with authoritarian teaching styles still prevalent in some African institutions. Osai Bonso and Okoye 2020 contend that theological educators in Africa often unconsciously replicate colonial and ecclesiastical hierarchies in their pedagogy, creating distance between themselves and learners. Yet Jesus, in washing the disciples' feet, redefined greatness. John chapter 13, verse 12 to 17. He modeled a pedagogy of humility and incarnation, entering into the world of the learner. This servant-hearted authority does not negate academic rigor, it humanizes it. According to Mwagi 2022, servant leadership in the classroom translates into respecting the learner's voice, working alongside their struggles, and leveraging authority to uplift rather than suppress. A radical teacher wields influence not through fear, but through integrity, consistency, and love. As Naboth and Kansimi 2024 explain, influence in the theological classroom must be pastoral, not performative. Students are not spectators in a lecture hall, but pilgrims on a shared journey of faith and learning. Subheading 3: Modeling Christ-like pedagogy, being the message we teach. At the heart of radical teaching is incarnational modeling. Jesus didn't merely teach truth, he was the truth. John chapter 14, verse 6. Likewise, the theological educator must not only deliver theological content but also embody it. Anderson and Mugambi 2021 assert that African theological students are formed more by the lifestyle and spirit of their teacher than by syllabi. This underscores the urgent need for integrity, vulnerability, and spiritual maturity among educators. The radical teacher's life is a living curriculum. Furthermore, Christ-like pedagogy entails relationality. Zulu in 2023 notes that theological teaching in Africa must move from transactional to transformational. Our students do not need more answers. They need mentors who love them, challenge them, and work with them. The teacher-student relationship becomes a space of grace, correction, and co-discipleship. Modeling Christ-likeness also involves embracing limitations. Theological educators, as finite beings, must depend on the Holy Spirit. They must confess when they are wrong, be open to learning from their students, and foster a learning culture grounded in humility. As Paul exhorted Timothy, the teacher must watch your life and doctrine closely. 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 16, realizing that theology is not just taught, it is caught. Conclusion: becoming radical to raise reformers. To reimagine the educator's role in Africa is to accept a radical calling, to change from monologue to dialogue, from hierarchy to humility, and from delivery to embodiment. It means embracing the discomfort of change and the beauty of transformation. Theological education in Africa will only be as deep, dynamic, and spirit-led as its teachers are. As one student interviewed by Amisi and Wayama 2023 reflected, the best teachers are the ones who don't just teach the Bible, they live it out before us. This is the radical teacher Africa needs. Not perfect, but present. Not controlling, but empowering. Not just professional, but prophetic. Let us then resist the temptation to merely update our techniques. Let us allow the Spirit to reshape our identity as educators, radical, Christ-like, and committed to forming faithful servants for the African church and beyond. This book, Effective Teaching,